Hi there, my name's Anna and welcome back to my art channel. So in today's video we're going to be painting a jellyfish and we're going to be using mostly watercolor and we're also using some masking fluid. You can see I've already sketched out my jellyfish. You can't see a lot of the sketch because it's really light, but now I'm using a tiny little brush to add masking fluid to all of the little tentacles of the jellyfish, because it would be nearly impossible to paint around those. And since we're using watercolor, you can't use a lighter color over darker colors, so there's no chance of painting these in last if I'd already put paint down on these areas. Hence the masking fluid. I'm using this small little brush and I have to make sure I clean it very thoroughly with a lot of soap and water afterwards so I don't ruin the brush, because the masking fluid is basically like glue and it would definitely ruin my bristles. Just make sure I've put it down everywhere where I want it. This masking fluid isn't very heavily tinted, so it's a bit hard to see where I put it down, but it is a little bit yellow so you can tell. And I've made sure now that the masking fluid has dried. And it's important to not use a hairbrush in this case, otherwise the masking fluid would kind of bake into the paper and you can't get it off again. So I just let it dry naturally, and now I'm going in and I'm painting the background. And for that I am using a very neutral mix. I think Payne's Grey with a little bit of blue added into it. And I'm just painting around the jellyfish and over the tentacles, because those ones, of course, those I've masked. But I haven't masked the body of the jellyfish because that would have been too much hassle. And I'm using a round paintbrush, a round watercolor brush for this. It's a fairly large one. And I'm adding the background color twice to get it as dark as possible and to have a relatively smooth finish. And the paint I'm using is the White Nights paint. And I have a nice large palette of these paints now. I got that as a present at some stage. And the nice thing about this paintbrush is that it has a fairly large belly, basically, but you can also add fine details with the tip, so that's ideal to kind of work around my subject. Because of course I haven't masked out the entire jellyfish. That would have taken way too much masking fluid and just had taken way too long, and since it's not that intricate, not as intricate as the little tentacles, it was fine just painting around it. And now I'm using ultramarine blue and a smaller paintbrush, and I've wet the head, I guess you could say, of the jellyfish, and I'm just kind of letting the paint flow a little bit. I'm also adding some warm red a little bit in the corner. And jellyfish are usually somewhat transparent, so I'm trying to imitate that slightly. There's more intense color around the edges of this jellyfish. He's more blue on top and a little bit more red at the bottom of his head. So not all of this is happening wet into wet. I'm not working quick enough for that. But that's not a problem. I've just added some paint, and then I will use a clean paintbrush with some water to kind of blend out the edges when I want a more smooth finish, or not as harsh edges in any case. And you saw there a minute ago I used a hairdryer to speed up the drying process and to add now more layers on this jellyfish. And the nice thing about watercolor, of course, is it's transparent, so you can add loads of layers, and it lends itself very well for something that is meant to be somewhat translucent. Apart from the ultramarine blue and the warm red I'm using, I've also used a little bit of cobalt blue, I think it was. Anyway, slightly cooler blue there in the middle of the jellyfish, and just kind of slowly building up the texture of the jellyfish a bit, adding a bit more color, smoothing things out until I get the effect I want. In some areas the red and blue have mixed in a way that they create a bit of a purple hue. And now I'm wetting the, let's call it body of the jellyfish, the wobbly bit that comes down from its head, the larger area, not the tentacles. And again, I'm letting blue and red flow into each other. I'm also using some cooler blues here and some purple. I'm not quite sure if I used pure purple from my palette or if I mixed it a little bit, and I let those colors flow into each other nicely. I'm adding a little bit more detail and some cooler blues on the top of the jellyfish there as well. And now I'm adding some more water to another portion, and again letting the paint flow wet into wet. Just trying to create that texture that this part of the jellyfish had, with some lighter and some darker areas. Once that has dried, I'm going in wet on dry, and I'm adding some more texture and some more details. There's some little areas that are a little bit darker, and the jellyfish looks to have a bit of curly edges. I'm just kind of indicating those with the wet on dry technique. And again, I've added another layer on the top of the jellyfish. And now I'm just using my finger to rub off the masking fluid. It's important to keep your finger clean though, otherwise you might end up smudging the paint. So always check in between if your finger is still clean, so you really preserve those white areas if you need them to be very white. And now I'm using an intense mix of red. This I really don't want to be terribly diluted, and I'm painting in those tentacles as final detail to this jellyfish. And I think you can already kind of see what it is I'm painting, and it's turned out nice, I think. Tentacles as exact as possible. Using a slightly smaller pointy brush for this. So that's my jellyfish nearly completed. I hope you enjoyed this painting process and maybe you painted along with me. And I hope you give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you again soon in one of my next videos. Take care and bye bye.